Hey Math 6, welcome back. Another week of online learning. You guys are doing so great. I'm so proud of how well you're doing with your tests and how you're just sticking with it. Even though some things have changed and we're still working on it, you guys have been patient and you have worked so hard, and I'm so proud of you. I still miss you like crazy and can't wait to see you again. And I know that you are going to finish this year so strong. So let's get started on this lesson. So lesson 105 is, I think the technical title in the book says using proportions to solve percent problems. I just shortened it and called it percent proportion because when I teach this topic, that's usually what I call it. I call it percent proportion. So we've worked on proportions, how to set up proportions before. Just a refresher, a proportion is just an equivalent statement of two different ratios. But what we're going to do in this lesson today is talk about percent proportion. So setting up a proportion when a percent is involved, okay? So the first thing I need to remind you of is that when we are talking about percents, the total is always 100%. So if I said every person watching this video is going to get an A, which I'm sure you will, then that would be 100% of the people watching this video, okay? So that's how total in percentages works. So let me pull up this little concept real quick that we can work with. So here we go. Yeah, so total percent is equal to 100%, okay? So anytime you have a percent column in a proportion table, which we're gonna see, your total can always be listed as 100, okay? So let's look at a couple of examples here so that you can see what I'm talking about. It's a lot easier to explain these when we look at examples and you can see what a percent proportion problem actually looks like. So let's move over into that. Okay, so we've got our first percent proportion problem here. So I'm going to read it and we'll look at how we can fill in the table. So I went ahead and set up the table. They won't always give you a table, okay? So sometimes you might have to draw this table. So it's a good idea to learn the pieces of this table and how to set it up. If you'll notice, it's very similar to proportion tables that we've done in the past. Just a couple things are a little bit different, so we'll look at that in just a second. But let's read the problem first. So it says 30% of the paintings were portraits. If there were 12 portraits, how many paintings were there in all? Okay, so we know that we can take our key information out of that. We know that 30%, oh, it's black. I would really like a color on there. Let's change that. 30% of the paintings were portraits, okay? So then we see that piece of information. Then we see if there were 12 portraits, how many paintings were there in all? So paintings in all. So in all should make you think what? Total. Very good. I know that's what you were thinking. So total is what in all should make us think. So we're looking for how many paintings there are all together, okay? So let's fill in the information that we do know here. So let me get a different color real quick. I think we'll go with blue. Okay, so 30% of the paintings were portraits. So that's a percent. So that's going to go in our percent column. So when we're dealing with percent proportions, we've always got a percent and an actual, okay? So in the percent column, we know 30% of the paintings were portraits. So my 30 can go right here, okay, with portraits and percent, okay? If there were 12 portraits, so that's an actual. There's actually 12 portraits, okay? It doesn't say 12%, it says 12 portraits. So that's an actual. So you got to look for the percent sign or like the word percent to show you what goes in the percent column, okay? Anything else is going to be an actual amount. All right, how many paintings were there in all? Now, I don't know how many there were in all, so actual total, I don't know. That's what we're looking for. Total percent, remember we do know this because that's what we just talked about. Total percent is always 100. So did they give me that information in the question? They did not. So that comes from your brain, from your memory, okay? You have to remember, oh, I can fill in 100 every time it asks me what the total percent is, okay? So now we could fill in the not portrait section, but really once we've identified the row that we know, which would be the portraits row, because we know everything in that row, and the row where we need to know something, which would be the total row, that's all we need to set up our proportion. Okay, so sometimes you might need that extra row where it says like not portraits in this case. In this one, we do not. So we'll just, actually, I'm not even going to fill it in because we're just going to set up our proportion here. Okay, so we literally just put everything in the order that it's in the table. And then to solve for x, we can cross multiply. So 100 times 12, that would give me 1200. And then 30 times x equals 30x. So then I want to get x by itself. So right now 30 is being multiplied by x. So I'm going to have to divide by 30. Divide by 30. And I'm running out of room. So I'm going to have to go over to the next little section. But if I divide 1200 by 30, then that should give me 40 equals x, or 40 paintings in all. Okay? Awesome. All right, let's look at one more. Clear this little section out. All right, so one more problem. Here we go. Okay, only 40% of the team members played in the game. If 24 team members did not play, then how many did play? Okay, so now we're starting to see kind of the did not play, did play information come in. So let's pay attention real quick to what we know and what we need to know. Okay, so 40% played. Okay, so that tells us 40% played. So that's a percent. So that's going to go in my percent column, and that's the amount that played. Okay. 24 team members, not percent, team members did not play. So that's an actual, and that's how many did not play. Okay, so then the question is, how many did play? Well, so I don't know how many actually did play, but I do know all this information I already filled in. And what other piece of information can I fill in? I know you said it. We can put the 100 under the total percent. Good. So if we now also think about this, if we know that 100 is the total percent and we know that 40% played, that means that what percent had to not play? It would have to be whatever's left, the difference of 140. So that would have to be 60, because together the 40 and the 60 add up to the 100. Do you guys see that? So now I've got my row with everything that I know, which is my did not play row. I've got my row with the thing I don't know, which is my played row. So I'm going to take those two, and I'm actually going to bring them over here to set this up. Sorry, you guys can see my fingers really big. So 40 over 60 equals x over 24. Okay, so I want to get x by itself. So I'm going to cross multiply again. Cross multiply, butterfly, whatever you want to call it. So 40 times 24, and then, which that would be, let me calculate that one real quick. So see, I'm going to show you an example. You can always bring that off to the side if you're not. So 40 times 24. So you could work that out. Okay, 0, 0, 0, then filler 0. 16, it's going to be 960. Okay, so 960 equals 60x. Okay, so then I'm going to divide by 60. So x is going to equal 16. Okay, so that tells me that 16 of the team members did play, and that's what I was looking for. Okay. All right, well, that's pretty much it. So just to recap, percent total is always 100. So you need to know that and use that when setting up your percent proportion tables, okay? Just another thing that we didn't really talk about, but like when you see two things being compared like a couple of times in a question like this, that should signal to you, oh, this is a percent proportion question, or this is a proportion question in general, but especially if it's got percents involved, that should signal like, oh, I think I'm dealing with percent proportion here. Because in this lesson, that's obviously our new concept, so it's going to be fresh and you're going to be able to remember that that's what you do. But later on, when this is not so fresh, I still want you to be able to look at word problems like this and still be able to say, that's a percent proportion question. Okay, so just make sure you recognize how to identify that if you see a question like this, and just make sure you make your chart just like we did. Make the little table, okay? Percent on one side, actual on the other, and then all your variables, always list out your variables out here, okay? Happy homework, guys.